With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 350 plus undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Happily Never After show. I'm your host, Kate Mollison, resident grief expert and widow. And I'm here with a really incredible team of ladies who I've met recently. I'm here with SUNY New Paltz University research team, and we're going to talk a little bit about a really exciting project that they have coming up. Thanks, ladies, for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah. So, Lizette, Kelly, why don't you guys take a moment, and for the listeners who aren't familiar with SUNY New Paltz and or research projects in general, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourselves?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Kelly Hass. I am a counselor education faculty member at SUNY New Paltz, and my interest in research has primarily been around somatic experiencing. I really focus on foodways and stuff, which isn't quite relevant here, but that's one of my main things. And then ties into nature, the world, and all this stuff. So just a very holistic approach to things. And that's about it for me. Lisette is someone that came into my path, and I came into her path. So I'll let her go from there. Yeah.
My name is Lisette Teresin. Thanks again for having us, Kate. I am a graduate student in the counselor department at SUNY New Paltz, which of course is how I met Dr. Hass. I'm also a yoga teacher who specializes in movement for seniors, death doula, and a grief coach, and have been working sort of in the grief space for about 5 years now. Which is really what led me to want to do a graduate program in counseling to sort of, begin to elevate conversations around grief in the counseling world, because I think that it is one of the least talked about things in our world. That is one of the biggest things in our world, which I know is a passion of yours as well. But Dr. Hass and I are doing this research project on how grievers experience authentic movement. Authentic movement is a somatic intervention that was developed in the 1960s, where one person moves while they're being witnessed, and they just sort of move in any way that their body feels is necessary, with their eyes closed, no music. And then they switch places, and then the witness and the mover come together and have an exchange of sort of what happened. And then, there's some creative arts expressive work around it as well. But we really think authentic movement has been shown to be effective for PTSD and trauma and depression and anxiety, but it's never been studied in the context of grief, which is really why we're so excited about this research project, because this idea of being witnessed.
It's like an emotional trust fall almost.
It's exactly like that. Yeah.
Yeah, huge.
to like have a
Huge
person
trust.
who you can trust to bear witness to
Mhm.
the most raw and unraveling of the human condition, I think, right? Like having personally experienced it and specifically pertaining to spouse loss, one of the biggest things that I commonly heard, like, oh, she's crying again, or like I'm so good at crying in public. I would go out to the grocery store and I would see his favorite dessert on sale, and the next thing you know, I'm like sitting on the floor in the grocery store as people are stepping over my legs because I'm
Mhm.
completely unraveled. And we're talking, weeks after his death, even a couple months. Obviously, it's not like that 5 years down the road, but I wonder if some degree my capacity to put myself back together so quickly is due to that social stigma and that social judgment. And it sounds like a lot of what this research project is working to do is to help release that judgment on grieving out loud. Can you talk a little bit about that for me?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when it comes to grieving out loud and sort of what that means, and I love this image, Kate, of you. I mean, I don't love the image, of course, it's
I know what
devastating.
you mean.
I love the image of you sort of like coming onto this grocery store aisle and just sort of letting it go, right? I
Yeah.
I lived in New York City for almost 2 decades, and everyone who lives, all New Yorkers know that the subway is the best place to cry, right? It's like this place where you are just
Like
underground.
dinner and a show. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a little bit like that,
Really,
right?
the subway is like dinner and a show. If you know, you know.
I think that, this grieving out loud, or this, people are walking over you. How many people, when you were in the grocery store,
Oh,
stop?
at least a dozen people walked over me, and I think only
Right.
one person other than store staff
Mhm.
stopped and was like, "Honey, are you okay?" But the store
Right.
staff was this like 20 something, white dude who like came and like bent hinged at the waist and like patted me on the shoulder and was like, "You all right, champ? Can I call someone?" Like, so, and I realized what I had unearthed and put on him, and it almost felt
Mhm.
literally like I had
Mm.
blanketed the people around me with my grief. And then it was this very quick realization of like, oop, and had to like pull everything
Mm.
back, recoil, withdraw, put away, like fold up the tarp real quick and shove it in the bed of the truck and speed off into the sunlight because you don't want anyone to know, like, woo, put those blinders on.
So on top of your own grieving, you're also experiencing guilt for
Mhm.
having grieving feelings. Yeah.
And you're
So
moving through it
yeah,
so quickly that you don't even get to process it because you're helping manage other people's
other people's
reaction. You're
emotions.
so
Mm-hmm.
worried about the perception, the guilt,
Mm-hmm.
the repercussion, right? Thinking about it when I went back to work and having those emotions, even in the back, like off stage, if you will, because I worked in a retail environment, off stage, you're not customer facing, but to even still feel like I couldn't have that moment of upheaval to then collect myself and go back out. It was just, it's at the door and you're there for 8 hours. And that is just a pressure cooker waiting to happen. And then
Mm.
I would go home and I would default to poor, modalities of adapting because I didn't have a safety net at home either, where I could go and just be. After a certain amount of time, everybody, even my close family circle, was kind of like, enough already. And not in so many words. Obviously, people don't come out and say that, and there isn't meanness meant from it, right? But it's just the way that our culture has become, where we are so put off by that
Right.
grief experience after, say, 6 months.
Right.
When I
Right.
think,
And if we,
go
yeah.
ahead, Dr.
I was
Haas.
just going to add, like, even thinking about the diagnosis of prolonged grief disorder, right? That's something in our research we were debating. Do we only want folks who have a diagnosis of bereavement or grief to be able to participate in the study, and we want it to be really open because everybody experiences grief differently. And one of the worries about pathologizing grief is just that, like telling people, okay, you can only grieve for 6 months to a year. After that, you have a diagnosis that
You're
is,
broken.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, that you're doing it wrong kind of thing. So
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
And
And
I
of
think
course that can be helpful for some people who are like, I need additional care and I can get that through insurance because I have this diagnosis. But at the same time, how much of that is being absorbed into their belief about themselves and how they're not grieving properly or whatever. They're grieving too much. Yeah.
For sure. Lizette, you were going to say.
Yeah, well, I think that, pathologization, can someone say the word correctly? Pathologization of grief, is sort of this, uh, out, this sort of foil to the idea of grieving out loud, right?
Mm.
If we can pathologize it, you're allowed to grieve out loud. If you can be given this diagnosis, you're allowed to fall apart. But if you are a person who is just experiencing grief, we ask you to keep it all inside. And it is my belief that, when we don't give our bodies an outlet, when we don't give our physical selves an opportunity to grieve out loud, we have
Mm.
moments where we can't help but fall apart on the subway or on the grocery aisle floor. And that we, you know, using our physical selves as a way to express our grief is necessary, I believe, in our grieving process, and used to be a way that we grieved historically. In ancient Rome, people would walk through the streets wailing and keening, it's called, right? Where they would beat their
Mm.
chests and really wail and rip out their hair. And it was this very physical activity. And there would be, processions through the streets, and like the public would come together for these things. And one of the things that Dr. Hass and I are interested in exploring in this research is this sort of physical release of the grief, and how does that change people's, if we do this in a controlled environment, or like in an intentional way, not controlled, and in an intentional environment where we're encouraging people to explore their grief physically, right? In a
Mm.
physical way. How does that change? Does it change? Maybe it doesn't, but does it change their grieving process? And are there less grocery store aisle moments? Are there these, if we are able to use our physical selves to explore grief in the way that, historically we always did?
Yeah. Like I think
Grocery
about
store moments,
the Viking
okay, right?
funerals, right?
Yeah.
Like the Viking
Yeah.
funerals are this big physical manifestation of our loss. Or even like what Stalin was in glass encasement for public viewing
Now
for,
it's still
I think
Chair
he's still
Mao is
right, like
still in
decades
glass,
and
yeah,
decades and
in Tiananmen
decades and
Square.
decades and decades of this, right? How
Yeah.
do we take those same type of public displays of loss, of importance, of fidelity to our community, our people, that our humanity, right? How do we take those examples and parlay them into smaller world pieces and modalities? And I think that this somatic approach, if I had some people had recommended like tapping, or what is it, the rapid eye movement, the EMDR, and all
Yeah.
of that stuff. And I had found hypnotherapy to be very helpful because my situation was a traumatic one, and being present with it in the moment was way too much. But even now, as I find triggers and upheavals and I'm out in public, it's not that I don't want to have them for other people's sake. Again, that grocery store situation made me real comfortable real quick. I can be a mess in public, and it is a
Right.
you problem, not a me
Yep.
problem. Right?
Yep.
Like we get there, but do we have to get there?
Right.
Should we have to get there? And if I had had a modality potentially to explore on my own, it's not about keeping it secret. It's not about minimizing it. It's not about not experiencing it, but it's about experiencing in a way that's intimate between me and my person who I've lost. It's a way of doing it privately if I don't want to be a spectacle, right? Some people don't want that, good, bad, or indifferent. And it's a way for us to help other people self soothe, because we as humans are, communal by nature. And so by you guys providing this symbiosis in grieving, in the raw, real experience, what an incredible gift you're giving, not just to participants, but to people out in the greater world, right? So let's talk a little bit about what your plans are for this research project. We talked about what the project is itself, but how long is the project going to last? What are you looking to do with the findings? When are you looking to present? I'm so excited for all of this because I think it's just going to change all the things.
Yeah, so we're in the process of getting participants right now. So we've got some flyers out locally, and
And if anyone's listening who's
yeah,
interested, we'd love to hear from you.
well, for
You
real,
beat me
yeah.
to it. I love it.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in participating, just have some experience with grief and willingness to try this. So Lisette did a whole bunch of groundwork this past semester and got IRB approval to be able to do it. So then we threw out some flyers and gathering participants. And then once we're looking for a small group so it can be really intimate, really safe. So we're thinking like 4 to 6 people, so that there's partners again for that swapping, or 8 people, whatever. So we're looking for a good small group of people. And we'll conduct the study sort of intervention someday. So it'll be kind of like a long afternoon of doing the somatic stuff, doing some creative arts in between. And each of the switching rounds will have some time to sort of process a little bit and take some data from the processing. But we're also going to do a pre and post interview to get some data qualitative wise from the participants. And then, yeah, I mean, Lisette's writing the lit review right now. So once that's good, we've got that. Once we get the data, then we can put it all together and synthesize and make it a thing.
So is the goal for this to be a repeat project, maybe expanding the size of the focus group to a larger demographic, or are you looking to repeat this study for further information to compare when you do the report?
I mean, what I really ultimately want to do with this is open up the conversation around somatic use for people who are grieving, because again, there's just not a lot of research on alternative somatic interventions. We see a lot about mindfulness, we see a lot about yoga, and how these kinds of physical activities can be really powerful ways for people to move through grief. But in the actual somatic counseling world, we don't have any sort of conversation around these kinds of alternative modalities and how they may be interesting. One of the things that really this all came about, it piqued my interest. There was a study I was reading about how grievers were assigned to a mindfulness training and a progressive muscle relaxation training. And we think about mindfulness and yoga and all of these things in the last 10 years have become a big part of the grief conversation. And like you said,
Sure.
emotional freedom technique tapping or EMDR or even shaking or these kinds of things have really entered the grieving conversation. But this study that was about progressive muscle relaxation was just so fascinating to me because it was shown to have a more significant effect for people who were grieving than mindfulness alone, which, is this physical, it was really more about being in the body and being aware of what's happening in your body. And that somatic awareness, that bodily awareness was more healing for people than even like a physical activity of yoga. It's not just the physical activity, it's the somatic awareness around it. And so one of the things that's really special about authentic movement that I think we're really interested in, adding to the conversation around authentic movement, is that there's this component of witnessing. And I'm sure, Kate, in your conversations, you've come across a lot of the times when people are grieving, and maybe this is why we have subway moments or grocery aisle moments, is because there's something deep down inside of us that wants to be witnessed in our grief. And there's a lot of research around when people feel seen in their grief, they are able to move past it a little, or through it, not past it, through it, integrate it in a different way. And because authentic movement has this witnessing component so built into it, it just feels to me like it could be a really powerful new avenue for counselors to explore grief treatment with people. And I think, especially when we talk about spousal loss, it could be a really powerful healing tool because you are in this partnership with somebody. And the ask is to, when you're the witness, to be completely empathetically invested with this person without storylining, without interpreting their movements, without
grief stealing, right? That like anecdotal relating that we love to do.
Exactly, without that, right?
Yeah. This is like game changing. And I don't think you guys even realize like what you have in front of you, right? Like I'm listening to you talk and I think about, again, my own experience, and it's all I can really rely on. And in those, like that early, and I'll call that early phase, that within 6 months of the loss, that early grieving phase, I was so numb to everything. And I was trying anything to feel something, right? Like there was drinking, there was eating, there was not eating, there was spending 8 days a week at the gym, right? And literally, like I was at the gym 3 times a day, 90 minutes each time, 6 days a week, because I just needed, I had so much frenetic energy because I was dealing with the probate and the wrongful death. And it was like close to the holidays and it was peak of COVID and my kids were little and I had adult disabled parent and like a house I didn't own and all of these layers of trauma that you're just project managing. You're so outside of your own body and you're trying to continue work. And I hadn't had physical contact, let alone physical intimacy with my husband for about 2 months prior to his death because of the nature of his injury. And obviously afterwards, you're in that like absentness. But grief, the reason grief is so like big is because it's counterintuitive to our human nature. We are community driven people, like creatures. By our biology means it is interdependent for us to have connection and relationship. We thrive on that. And grief literally interrupts that process. Our capacity to be connected, our capacity to connect, our capacity to receive connection, all of those are interrupted by grief. And so what this really does is it just kind of wipes the slate clean from that judgment, from that experience, from that you don't have those filters, those lenses, those washes. And yes, sometimes having your own personal experience with it is important, but removing that ability for people to layer in their own, you know, perspectives and thoughts on it for the other person, what a game changer. It is
While
really
still
hard
being
to
in
stand
that,
there in grief in front of someone else, but knowing that you get to give your experience with, you just leave it all on the table. What a gift.
yeah, I think that, you know, the ask to not storyline while still being in community, right? And like you said, like we are communal creatures. And so in an authentic movement circle, you are in community in this very held space. Um, but it's like it's this community that isn't asking anything of you, right?
Yeah.
I think is a really hard thing that grievers experience. You know, when you so desperately want to be around people, but you also are having this feeling of wanting, at least I think we all experience grief differently, but for me, I go inward, right? I want to,
Yeah.
I need to just have not have, but I would love it if all of my friends could just come and sit and not speak to me.
Right. But to a degree, that's a biological response, right? Like from a grieving perspective, the cortisol hormone is flooding your system. You don't have the capacity for those conversations and to maintain skills. You lack object permanence. You have all of these things from a rudimentary perspective that interrupt your brain and interrupt our ability to have community. So by putting these groups of people together in a community, you are really just affording them an opportunity for advanced, I won't say accelerated, but advanced grief healing. Like, I love this. I'm curious though, in creating this community in the after of the research study, what are your thoughts or plans for that group of people? Are you going to keep them connected, whether it be through like Facebook group or newsletter, or are you hoping that they just go back to their normal, their own avenues for, you know, data integrity? Or what does that look like? Are we like, what, world's our oyster? I love it.
I think that's a great question. So part of that is like when you think of the research ethics behind having participants and trying to keep people anonymous for the sake of distributing the data, we will likely not, you know, facilitate a continued experience, but we'll offer, you know, other resources that they can go to if they need continued care. Of course, in any type of group, whether it's a counseling group or otherwise, like people tend to make groups inside
Yes.
and outside of those groups. So we're not going to stop them from supporting each other after the fact. But yeah, I think that's a really great point, actually. I don't know if we really considered future in terms of this specific group, but I guess it's just kind of an unspoken, like, it does seem like it's going to be a connecting sort of experience, but without that no forced connection afterward. If people, do want to do some
Yeah.
internal, like, let me leave now and never talk to you all again, or whatever.
But it becomes completely voluntary, right? And I think that there's power in that as well. One of the biggest, hurdles in grief is the power of choice. So much of the grieving experience is happening to you, and even specifically with spouse loss, right? Like, so much happens to you. But by you guys creating an environment where they not only have the choice to be present, to be authentic, to share, to receive, but then they now have the power of choice beyond the confines of your program and your research project to go and change the grief community themselves by collaborating and maintaining relationships and sharing their experience and all of that stuff. So I think that is absolutely incredible. And I really hope that you guys do multiple of these, because I would love, like, let's circle back a year from now and see when you've done 16 of these and we are out here changing the world with some really great research data. Lizette, let me ask you this real quick. Oh, Kelly, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say a bit about the research in terms of, it does sound like a small number, like 4 to 8 people sounds very small. But using interpretive phenomenological analysis, which is our framework, is actually, it calls for a small thing. So we can get some really in-depth data from people's stories. So we want to be able to tell their individual stories and just open the floor to, like, we don't know what this is going to do for you. Tell us what it does for you. And from there, future research could be, more focused on mixed methods and studying in terms of, like, large scale numbers, or how do you have similar experiences to other people who've done this before, that kind of thing. But yeah, the small thing, I know it can, like, throw people off, but it's actually really going to be a great, like, in-depth way of getting some data. So we're excited about it. Yeah.
I think size doesn't necessarily matter, right? Like, it's quality, not quantity.
Totally. I think too, our hope is that, this, like we said at the beginning, that this has never been investigated in the context. Authentic movement as a modality or somatic intervention has never been investigated in the context of grief counseling. And so if this does seem to be something that people are moved by, which again, I hesitate on an ethical boundary here to say what I expect or want to happen, because that is not within the framework of investigative phenomenological analysis. But I do, it is my non-professional belief that this really could add to the conversation in a really meaningful way, and that because this is a modality that does not require anything. Okay, you can do this with one other person in your home. You don't need a person who's certified in leading it to lead it. So it's not like yoga, right? You don't need training in it to do it, because all it is listening to your body. It is a very democratic, accessible practice that anyone can do. And if we can popularize this, or begin a conversation around this modality as being a really powerful tool for grievers, then I think that we, have succeeded in what we're aiming to do here.
Absolutely. So Lizette, let me ask you this. While we know that it's going to be a small group and that it opens the floor for potential research, we also know that the epigenetics of grief can be directly impacted by self modalities in grief healing, right? Like, what are your thoughts on how this could potentially have an impact on generational grief healing or epigenetics within grief healing?
Oof. Okay. So now we're really getting into, I think, somatic work in general, right? Because I think that so much of the generational traumas and griefs, and and given what is happening in our world right now, I think we're going to need the kinds of things to examine and explore generational grief in an even more profound way. but I believe that somatic work is the way through generational grief, right? Like if stuff is living inside your nervous system, there is no way to get at it other than movement, right? It is our nervous system, our body
Yeah.
that can work with our nervous system to move those things out. And so, I think that if authentic movement, if we can show that authentic movement is a powerful way to move through personal grief. I would love to further explore how that might work with generational trauma, right? Because generational
Mm.
trauma is a type of grief. And, um, speak like epigenetic grief, like if we're on a podcast about spousal loss, right? Like if your parents lost their spouse and your grandparents lost a spouse and your great grandparents lost a spouse, right? Like how does that live in your body? How does that show up in
Mm.
your body? That's, a form of generational trauma.
And in ways we don't even realize sometimes until we do some of this somatic activating work that really kind of just brings some of those previous traumas and generational things to the surface. And
Exactly.
sometimes the way we parent or the way we talk to a partner or the way we react in conflict or the way we act at work are all related to grief in some
Mhm.
capacity. And for some, maybe it's the epigenetics of grief, right? Like, well, it's the way we've always done it. To a degree, that's epigenetics. Dr. Haas, let me ask you, where do you think that this project has the potential to go? In your mind's eye, in an ideal situation, if you could say, where would this land? What would this do for SUNY New Paltz, for you guys as a research team, for grief healing, any and all of the above?
It can go to the moon, it can go all, everywhere it wants to go. So I think, like Lisette said, this is our just kind of first stepstone because it hasn't been researched in particular around grief. So using authentic movement with grief, first thing to do is just see what the heck happens if we do it. From there, we can do more large scale quantitative studies and expand out, especially expand out past our own little locale. But I don't think that needs to be just Lisette and I alone, right? That's where other
Yeah.
people can come into play across the US, across whatever. So looking at different populations and how other people experience somatic grief, depending on like cultures and family histories and all that kind of stuff. I think there's going to be rich information across everything with this. So I really don't think there's like a limit to it. It's just a matter of, um, I think, yeah, time and growth and just trusting in the process. Um, yeah, and I think really just building awareness. I mean, hopefully our data shows that it's useful. I think, and Lisette was really hesitant to say that, we believe this is actually going to do something, but based on the literature and based on what we've seen already, it probably will do something helpful. So hopefully if we can find, something useful to the public or see like, okay, the way that we did it for this study actually didn't do much. Maybe doing it a different way for a future study would do better. So if we're doing a 1 day seminar and someone decides, okay, that 1 day seemed like it might have done something, but let's actually expand that to a 6 week course or something like that, depending on whatever we find. So really think we're at the sort of baby stage of figuring it out, but there's no limit really to where we take this. So yeah.
I
And I
love
know
it.
Lisette's got other ideas too. She's got
Oh.
multiple research projects
Well, I was
brewing,
going to
so
say, like, this
that's
type
great.
of stuff and these types of projects don't just come out of thin air. Usually they come
Right.
from people and for people who have personal experience in
Mhm.
this arena, right? And like we all know that I have experience in grief, but you both have had your own personal experiences and there's no obligation to share, but if you so feel inclined, um what personal motivations do you have or personal inspirations do you have in your lives that are really just contributing to the impetus of this project?
Yeah.
So when like I said, I'm a yoga teacher and movement and sort of like that kind of somatic mindfulness work has always been a big part of my life, and it has been for Dr. Haas too. But when my mom died in 2018 after
Mm.
about a year long um, experience with acute cirrhosis, movement was how I worked through that. And I don't, I found it to be so extraordinarily almost frustrating how powerful it was, because I really just wanted to sit on my couch and smoke weed. You know what I mean? And and that didn't help, and yoga did, movement did. And so and I was teaching for a handful of years when she died, and it was like this thing that had become my life, and my livelihood was sitting right in front of me, and it was this answer, right? And then I discovered authentic movement relatively recently, about a year ago, and was like, what the heck is this practice? Like, this is phenomenal. And so sort of like gobbled it up everywhere I could find it. And I think in, I mentioned this before, but right after we met you, Kate, last month, a dear friend of mine committed suicide. There were there's so many complicated feelings around suicide that I couldn't, writing wasn't helping, talking about it wasn't helping, like traditional talk therapy. It's just, being with friends and being in community was helpful. But what I really found to be what worked for me, and this of course isn't true authentic movement because I was by myself, but just allowing my body to move in a really weird, wild way, right? And shut the door, shut your eyes, and just move. And so, I we had already began this research project. Of course, we were already working well into it, but it was such an edifying reminder that when grief is really complicated and disenfranchised and just painful and complex, and you're in that acute thick of it where you can't, you don't want to move, right? The answer is to move. Like, the answer is to get off the couch and put down that glass of wine and move, And I think authentic movement, because you have the community aspect of it, could really be this really extraordinarily powerful not new, but new application of using it for people who are grieving, because it is everything. It's that weird movement. It's being somatically aware. It's the mindfulness of being present in a space. It's community. It's being witnessed. It's being witnessed in a non-judgmental way.
Ticks all the boxes for
ticks
grief
all the
healing.
boxes. Yeah,
it does. It really does, right? Visibility, affirmation, comfort, care, physiology, kinetic movement, no poor modalities, all of it. Check, 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 check. So what more do people need to know, right? Like, that sounds like an easy sell for me,
well,
for
I need
lack
to
of
do
a
that
better word.
research when it comes out here.
So that's a great segue. People can actually get to meet you guys and talk to you guys and interact with you guys. You're going to be at the Grief Awareness and Education Conference on September 20th at the Mark Twain House in Hartford, Connecticut. You guys are going to do a lunch and learn for us and be able to present either preliminary findings or all total research findings. And for those who are listening and want to come out and meet Lizette and Kelly, I encourage you to get your tickets to conference now. But what are your hopes for being at conference? What are you hoping to have available to share with us or gain from conference yourself?
We are just pumped to be there. Yeah, we're really excited. So thank you for having us. I know we were like doing this research and we came across your stuff and we were like, oh my God, this is perfect. We need to reach out. So thank you for getting us involved. We're hoping to have conducted the interventions at that point. So being able to at least talk about some preliminary analysis of the interviews and the group processing would be ideal. So we're hopeful for that. Otherwise, we can talk all day about the research, like the lit review kind of
maybe we can get a demo, right? Like maybe we can get a demo.
Yeah, we're talking about that too. So yeah, so I've presented a couple times at various conferences on somatic experiencing and movement. And it's kind of a fun thing. People enjoy trying it, and in these fun spaces where maybe you're at a conference and you're used to staring at a screen. Instead, we're going to, circle up. We're going to start moving.
Yeah, I love it.
Whatever that looks like. So to show that or demonstrate that or talk about that. And then I think we're just excited to learn more about grief at your conference too. I know for me, I'm not fully immersed in the grief world of things, but it's definitely an interest, and it's a tie-in to what we're doing. So maybe Lisette has other hopes. Yeah.
But I love, Kelly, that grief may not be like
Mm-hmm.
personal to you. You may not have direct experience, but as
Mm-hmm.
an ally, for lack of a
Yeah.
better term, like
Grief
someone
ally.
in the community who knows that it will one day impact you and or the
Mm-hmm.
people around you,
Oh,
and
for
doing
sure.
the due diligence to have the skill set to support them the
Mm-hmm.
best way possible. I wish more people would just take that learning opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Death is not
Mm-hmm.
something that has to kill you to talk about.
Right.
It's not, right? Like, I don't mean to be
Yeah.
like
No,
punny, but
yeah.
it's true. Like, it doesn't kill you to talk about it, and it is,
Mm-hmm.
if anything, it does help versus hurt. So
Mm-hmm.
I applaud you for your willingness and ability to be part of the conversation,
Oh, for sure, for sure.
as an ally and as a friend, if you will. So, Lizette, any conference hopes, goals, anything you'd like to share with us?
Really quickly, I just want to touch on, you just said it won't kill you to talk about death. I don't know. There's some sort of like there's some sort of thing going on. You know, I'm really looking forward to being in community around people who are passionate about grief and death work, and really working to change the conversation around it. Because I do think it is one of our biggest holes in the counseling world, in the therapy world, in our world in general. um, you know, throughout, and this is no slight on SUNY New Paltz, but throughout my master's education, for example, I haven't had a single class offered around grief, right? So
Mm.
like, why? Right? It's such a huge thing. It's such a huge topic, but we really don't have a ton of literature, a ton of people who are willing to talk about it. And I think that that comes back to this sort of historical evolution of moving grief, you know, behind curtains in hospital rooms and under fluorescent lights and behind closed doors, and these processions and these big displays of mourning and grieving have
Mm.
really been asked to come inward. So I think that the work of this conference, and why I am so grateful for the work that you do in the world, truly, Kate, is, you know, I'm just excited to be around other death nerds.
I never would have thought myself a death nerd, but I'm totally making myself a button that
I
says
just
that
made that
now.
up.
Like, we're gonna hand out stickers that say death nerd. If I ever start a band, that's what it's being called.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's a
Love
very
it.
specific kind of music, though. But
It is a very specific kind of music,
nerd, yeah.
like
It's
techno
heavy metal
death
for
metal,
sure.
I feel
Oh,
like.
okay.
That's totally techno, definitely. But yeah, I
Techno death.
think, you know, and my hope is to be a part of the changing conversation around grief, death awareness, and accessibility of tools. Accessibility of tools
Yes.
being the huge.
Accessibility of tools.
This isn't something that people, you know, I would love to see a universe in which people had free and universal access to true grief healing tools,
Mhm.
and they're not having to pay a grief specialist $250 an hour or
Mhm.
whatever. Not that there's not a place for that, there absolutely is.
Sure.
You know, I think yeah, what I would really love is to be a part of the changing conversation, and to offer real tools for real people, particularly as our world becomes more
More
grief heavy,
unstable.
Mhm.
unstable and grief
More
heavy.
unstable and grief heavy. Yeah, like I think we were talking about it before we actually hopped on this recording, right? But like the global community right now is in complete disarray. And if we don't learn to handle grief within our own self and within our next concentric circles, then it just spills out into that global community. And
Well,
the impetus of the conference is to help us move through those circles and kind of normalize the experience, affirm what's happening from both a scientific perspective and from a like our cultural perspective, right? Those are two different things and they don't always align. And what we need chemically and what we're getting culturally aren't talking to each other. So I'm just really excited to have you guys at conference and to be a part of this. In the meantime, how do people get a hold of you if they're interested in either being a part of the study or learning more, or just saying, hey, how do they get in contact with you?
We've got a couple emails they can email. So if you want to reach out to us to be participants in the study, mine's hask@newpaltz.edu. So HASSK at newpaltz, NEWPALTZ.edu. And Lisette, I'll let you spell your own name.
Well, it's also these .edu email addresses are so wonky, right? But it's CHERESSL1 @newpaltz.edu.
Yes, you got it.
And we really would love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll add those email links in the show notes on my website as well. And so for anyone who is listening and wants to just reach out directly to me, I can always forward that information along. For anyone looking for information on the conference, please visit eventbrite.com/GAEC, GAEC, the Grief Awareness and Education Conference. We are just about out of time for our conversation today, but I always like to end these episodes by asking for one piece of advice that you would give to someone who is in grief.
I mean,
give you guys a moment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think the biggest thing is move. However that looks like for you. Shut your door, close your eyes, and move in a way that your body wants to, because you have more wisdom in your body than I think we give ourselves credit for. And your body will give you the movement that it needs to experience grief. And doing that, having a conversation with your body, I think opens up neural pathways for healing and exploring grief in a really significant way.
Yeah, it's like when you understand the laws of physics no longer apply, sky's the limit.
And going off of that, like as you're moving, really turn inward or outward. Like listen to what's happening for you internally. I know, Kate, you were talking about going to the gym 3 times a day, but that was more of like a external, like I'm just gonna move my body kind of thing, right? It's a lot of connection to what the body actually was asking for. Or maybe that was what I was asking for, whatever. But just giving the body what it's asking for.
I don't think so, because it wasn't sustainable. I don't think that's what my body was asking for. My body generally asks for like Taco Bell.
Yeah. Trusting, like Lisette said, that the body knows a lot, and we can listen internally and trust internally that we've got what we need, kind of thing, or that we can find what we need.
I love that. I think it's a difference between understanding, like sometimes our brains will lie to us, but our bodies have the wisdom, and we tend to keep those two things tangled together. So just being grounded in your body, being present in your body. Don't ignore your body. Listen to your body. But sometimes it's okay to ignore your brain because it's stupid and it tells you lies. Like
brain's silly. Brain is a liar. Yeah.
The brain is like a feral toddler, and you just have to give it snacks and naps to make it be quiet. That's all, right? Like
yeah. Seriously.
So, well, I'm glad we're able to end on a laugh and on a high note. And I am so grateful for the time that you ladies took with me today. For everyone out there listening, I'm your host, Kate Mollison, and this has been the Happily Never After Show. Until next time, with grief and gratitude.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Happily Never After, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Happily Never After, as well as the rest of the network at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.